So let's jump into our text. Let's take a look at 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 18. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 18. Here it says, now all these things are of God, who has reconciled us to himself. He has reconciled us to himself. He's reconciled us to himself. When Paul makes this statement, this is important for you to catch. When Paul makes this statement, he's using the word reconcile. In the context of Paul's day, the word reconcile was not a religious word. There was no religious connection. There was no religious significance, no religious meaning. It was a political word. It was a word that was used to describe the process of when two warring nations would come together and make peace with one another. And so Paul takes this term of making peace, removing the walls of animosity, removing walls of hostility, and bringing peace. He takes that word that in that political context, and he places it within the context of religion. And he says that there is a sovereign, holy God who wants to make peace with man. At that time in Paul's day, that's a radical statement. That was outside of their paradigm. That was outside of their comprehension of what they had known and experienced with God to that point. Whether they were Jew or whether they were worshiping, serving all the other pagan ideologies that existed in the day, the concept that there was peace with the God that they served was foreign. All that they knew was that they had to make sacrifices and offerings, and they had to have rituals, and they had to have priests to go in between them, because they had this conscious understanding that there was this wall that existed between them and God, that somehow or another their God was angry with them. And that's why they had to offer blood. That's why they had to offer sacrifices as a way to appease the anger of God. The Greeks used to say that if God could forgive sin, we don't know how. Because there was this conscious recognition in man that there was something within man that caused him to be separated from God. And even in the context of Judaism, they understood and they knew that there was a wall between them. Remember that the high priest went into the Holy of Holies, and that the Holy of Holies was behind the veil. And that veil represented the separation between God and man, the separation due to God's hostility and anger over man's sin and unrighteousness. And Paul is introducing a concept to them, and he's encouraging us to embrace that concept today, that God is initiating peace. God is saying the war is over. God is saying, I ain't mad at you no more. God is extending the olive branch of peace in the person of his son, who he brought to earth to die on a cross for you and I. Paul said that God has reconciled us to himself through Jesus Christ. It's a radical concept. They must have thought that Paul was crazy, that he was out of his mind. Because how could a holy, righteous God ever have peace with man? But Paul says God has reconciled us in the person of his son. That the hostility is gone. That God indeed is the initiator of reconciliation. He is extending the olive branch. Have you ever had conflict?